Hello everyone, Aaron Spears here, Young Adult Librarian at the Westlake Porter Public Library. We're in the kitchen again, which means it's another video of cooking with WPPL. And for today's recipe, I wanted to take a look at another dessert. I have two kids in the house, a teenager and a preteen, a tween, and they love the sweet stuff. They love baked goods, they love cupcakes, cookies, cakes, all that stuff. Even folks that don't have kids in the house but maybe have a sweet tooth, it's clearly best to avoid all of those delicious sugary treats, but there are also a lot of healthier options out there. So I'm fascinated by trying to find healthy dessert options, healthy sweet treats that we put into our repertoire at the house, so we can indulge in a lot of those flavor profiles and a lot of those certain types of treats without having all of the actual sugar and the bad stuff, going into our system and rotting our teeth and, racking up the dentist bills for the kids. So what I wanted to do today is share a recipe. It's kind of modified from a few different places I found online, but it's a healthy, and I'm not even putting that in quotes, it's a healthy chocolate chip cookie dough recipe. So we're gonna do that recipe first, but we're also gonna do, as a follow-up to that one, kind of an experiment. I thought, if we're gonna make chocolate chip cookie dough following this healthy recipe, we've got the dough, let's try and just make them as cookies. So I'm gonna do the dough itself first, which is just edible with a spoon, or we usually use graham crackers to kind of scoop it out and enjoy it. But then also, once we have the dough, I'm gonna take a little bit of that dough off to the side. I'm gonna bake that to see if we can actually make healthy chocolate chip cookies from the chocolate chip cookie dough healthy recipe. So let's jump into the recipe and at least get the dough made first.
This recipe really calls for only a few simple ingredients. We've got chickpeas, also known as garbanzo beans. We need creamy peanut butter or any kind of creamy nut butter of your choice. Rolled oats, baking powder. We're going to use a little bit of vanilla, actually kind of a bit of vanilla. Maple syrup for the sweetness. And then once we're done, we're going to use some chocolate chips to fold into the recipe. So let's start first with the chickpeas / garbanzo beans. You're going to want to open these up and then drain them and rinse them very thoroughly. The reason we're using chickpeas, I know it probably sounds a little gross to some people, especially if you're not like a bean fan, but these really give it a great creamy texture, and you can use it in a lot of different ways in different baking. I always tend to save the water because that's known as aquafaba, and that can be used in other dessert recipes to kind of whip up as, I think usually kind of like an egg substitute in different dishes. So we're gonna give these a nice solid rinse here in the sink. One benefit to using chickpeas in some of these healthier recipes too is that they add protein and fiber, good healthy protein and fiber into the recipe. So that is one of the health benefits of using chickpeas in this kind of recipe. Up next is the peanut butter. I'm just using the creamy peanut butter we always have on hand. You can use whatever nut butter you want, if it's almond or cashew or anything like that. We usually always have peanut butter around, so we'd use the peanut butter for this recipe. This is a 1/4 cup of peanut butter, so it takes a minute to scoop out, but it's delicious and it's worth it. One of the other benefits of using peanut butter along with the chickpeas is you get a little bit more protein in this recipe as well, thanks to the peanut butter. Next up is the rolled oats. We're going to do a 1/4 cup of rolled oats in this one. This is a substitute for flour in traditional cookie dough recipes. They've got fiber, protein, iron, antioxidants, and it allows you to make a quick mess because we only need a 1/4 cup. And I guess I could have scooped it out of the container, but it's more fun to make a mess sometimes. Make sure we get all the way right up to the top, and we are good on the oats. Baking powder is up next. This is a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. It's not necessarily needed in this recipe. It's what actually helps cookies rise if you're doing actual cookie dough, but I think it helps with the flavor consistency here. We're also going to do 1/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Cinnamon interacts with the vanilla in this recipe, so again, just a way to add a bit more flavor to the recipe. Up next, after the cinnamon, we're going to do 1/4 teaspoon as well of salt. We only have sea salt in our house for whatever reason, so we're going to add in that amount of sea salt into the mix. And there we go, on to the next thing. The next thing is the maple syrup. This is 1/4 cup pure maple syrup. We are not going to pour like we did with the oats because that would be a horrible sticky mess. You can add a little bit more than a 1/4 cup if you want, a bit more sweetness in your recipe. It's totally up to you. Up next after that is the pure vanilla extract. We're going to do 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. Again, this mixes in with the cinnamon and really brings out the flavors in the cookie dough. Any of these recipes online always say they need a food processor or a blender. We have a food processor, which I've never tried this recipe with, so I'm going to try it real quick here with the beans. And it's pretty obvious we're going to be right to the top here, so I don't think there's going to be room for the other ingredients. But let's give it a shot in the food processor, see if it processes down the beans and will allow us to add the other ingredients in. Let's give it a shot here, and it is not really condensing at all. So this food processor is too tiny for this recipe. We're going to switch to, yeah, this is just not going to work. We're going to switch to the full blender instead. Now we have a Vitamix here at the house, which is pretty high powered. It's very high powered actually. But I've also made this before in friends and family members' blenders. Standard blender will work just fine. You just may have to blend it a little bit longer than you would with a Vitamix. Then we're going to add in our peanut butter on top of the kind of somewhat pre-blended chickpeas. I did wash my hands, of course, many times during this, so I have clean hands scraping this off here. Then we're going to do the rolled oats here and next. Then the salt baking powder combo. And we're going to do the cinnamon. And we're going to add in the syrup, drain it in nice and gooey here. It's not necessarily the prettiest looking mix in here, but I guarantee you the taste is going to be well worth it. And then let's not forget the vanilla. Pour that in there, right there on top. It's funny how when you have a bunch of things together that are delicious on their own, somehow looks a little strange and possibly even a little gross once they're all put together in a blender. So we have it all in our blender. The lid is on. Let's start blending this together. Speeding this up thanks to the beauty of video editing. But this takes about 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes in the Vitamix. It can go up to like 3 to 5 minutes. I've done before in a standard blender. You want it to look smooth and creamy, maybe a little bit of a start and stop process where we take a look and see if we need to do any more blending. So let's take a look now and see what we've got for our cookie dough recipe. It's coming off pretty creamy. You want to look for like chunks of the oats that didn't quite get blended up. That's usually the telltale sign I look for, and I'm not seeing too many oats here stuck on the tamper. Taking a look inside, I don't see any large chunks of oats or anything, so let's go ahead and give this a scoop out into a bowl and see what we've got. The downside of using a blender, of course, is that it's kind of hard to scoop out because it's a sticky, gooey, delicious mess of batter. Let's speed this up here a little bit and get to the bowl a little quicker. This will be the part where we add in the chocolate chips next, or fold in the chocolate chips. I've used some mini chocolate chips here. We'll sprinkle it on. I'll just dump the whole thing in, actually. And if you want these to be vegan, this is when you'd use vegan chocolate chips. I only had the mini ones in the house, so that's what we used. If you want, more sweetness and a little bit, less healthy, go ahead and add in more than 1/3 cup. After this, we're going to put it in the refrigerator because it will kind of stiffen up a little bit and have a bit more of a dough texture. Oh, wait, no, actually, I forgot. We need a little bit of this scooped off to the side because we're going to do a little science experiment with baking this dough into chocolate chip cookies. So I'm going to scoop out, I'm going to scoop out maybe like 1/3 or so of it. Try to do maybe 4 to 6 cookies, depending on how I start scooping here. But I do want to save enough for later just to have it as an actual dip with the graham crackers, so we'll see that bit of batter in a little bit. We're going to set our oven to a 325 for this one while we get the pan ready. Oh, got to have the parchment paper on there that keeps them from sticking even more so. And I'm using kind of a heaping 1 tablespoon approach to these cookies, so it looks like I'm going to get probably more like 4 out of this than the 6 I was hoping for. But it's an experiment, so if it doesn't work, we're only going to be wasting 4 cookies rather than 6 cookies. Don't want to waste cookies if we don't have to. They aren't going to spread out that much when you cook them, so I actually did push them down a little bit with the tablespoon as I line them up here in the oven. Give it about 10 minutes, and we will check on these cookies, see what our science experiment looks like. They don't look like they baked really at all. Like there's no real crust to the top of them. Let them cool for a few minutes, then we're going to transfer them to the wire rack to finish their cooling. And yeah, they feel kind of just still like the dough, to be honest. And the dough's edible, so if nothing else, we've just got 4 portioned chunks of the dough. But we will see the chocolate chips held together pretty good. Texture looks all right. But again, it looks kind of just like the dough does. So speaking of the dough, let's get the dough back out and scoop that into a bowl here. I like to stick in a few graham crackers just for the, aesthetic beauty of it. Big bowl of totally healthy cookie dough and 4 experimental cookie dough cookies.
All right, it is moment of truth time. I've got the cookies. One already fell victim to one of my kids. They promised to not reveal to me what they thought of it until I tried these out here. As you saw in the video, I scooped them out. I actually did press them down just a little bit to make them a little flatter because they are not going to expand. They are not gonna soften up or flatten out or spread out at all when you cook them. And we'll do an honest assessment here because this was the experiment portion. It really does just feel like a collection of the dip, which is not bad because the dip is delicious itself. It didn't really crunch up at all on the top or bottom. It just kind of got a little bit of a harder shell on the outside. And I gotta say, it still does end up tasting very good, but it is not a cookie. It is a collection of the dip, so I'm gonna have to go grab some graham crackers to use with that. Would not recommend taking the time to bake it. It tastes virtually identical to the dip itself. Like I said, just maybe a little bit of a crustier outer shell, not even enough to give it a crunch or anything hard like that. So the cookies don't quite work. The dip is definitely staying in our repertoire. Since it's chickpeas, peanut butter, rolled oats, I'm cheating here, baking powder, vanilla, maple syrup. Chocolate chips are like the least healthy thing in here, and especially using the mini chocolate chips, you can always kind of cut that down a little bit. But portion-wise, you're not really getting much more than maybe 2 teaspoons of chocolate chips per serving, unless you just go ahead and eat the whole bowl, which I've definitely done. You're gonna get more chocolate chips in there. So that's really the only thing you have to mitigate health-wise going into this delicious treat. So recommend the dip, not quite as the cookies. See you next time with another version of a healthy, delicious, decadent treat.